One of the things that I know about suffering is it creates a compassion for other people who are suffering that you wouldn't have had. And so in that way, there's details about heartache and hardship that are clearly in God's wheelhouse of plans. So, I can't wish those painful periods weren't there.
You are listening to the Christian Music Archive podcast, part of the New Release Today podcast network. I'm your host, Dave Maurer. Each week, I share stories about Christ, community, and music, chatting with musical guests who you will find listed on the pages of the Christian Music Archive. There are thousands of creative men and women who have helped shape the soundtrack of the Christian faith, and we get to hear their stories, learn about how Christ has made a difference in their life, and hopefully along the way, we'll learn how we can be a better part of our community. Bryan Duncan is a Christian music pioneer. As a member of the Sweet Comfort Band, he helped pave the way for contemporary Christian music that we enjoy today. After recording 6 albums with Sweet Comfort, he went on to a successful solo career, releasing more than 20 albums. His powerhouse vocals combined with horn-driven rhythm and blues is just about the best music ever recorded, if you ask me. So I'm excited today to sit down with this legend of Christian music. We'll get to our conversation in just a minute, but I wanted to tell you about the Rohingya people of South Asia. For over 40 years, these people have faced discrimination, violence, and persecution. So much so that in 2017, a mass exodus of Rohingya citizens started with them fleeing their country for their lives and for their safety. And a lot of these people are ending up in Bangladesh and some of the surrounding countries. To make matters worse, in March 2021, there was a devastating fire in one of these large Rohingya refugee camps. Thousands of homes were destroyed, hundreds of children separated from their families, and hundreds more injured or dead. Now, this is all devastating and hard news to hear, but the reason I'm telling you this is because Mercy Inc. and their partners have been working in the Rohingya refugee camp to bring relief and hope. They are also sharing the good news of Jesus to anyone who's willing to listen. And I'd encourage you to jump on board and see how you can help. To learn more about how you can support Mercy Inc. and more specifically how to pray for the Rohingya refugees, visit christianmusicarchive.com/mercy. There you can click on the Rohingya link to see how you can be the hands and feet of Jesus to these hurting and displaced people. That's christianmusicarchive.com/mercy. I'm not afraid to say that Bryan Duncan is one of my favorite artists. As I mentioned in the opening, he has released more than 20 albums, including my favorite Christmas album of all time, Christmas is Jesus. Back in the 90s, when I was a concert promoter, I promoted more shows with Bryan than any other artist. One of my favorite promoter stories is with Bryan as well. After one of his concerts, I took him back to the airport, and in those days, he would dress in a black leather jacket with studs and chains, spiked hair, the whole works. This was also before the strict TSA screening that we have today. Anyway, we walked through security checkpoint together, and all of the alarms and lights went off because of Bryan's leather jacket. But nobody even batted an eye or came to look at what was going on. The security agent was so busy searching through the purse of this little old lady who I'm sure had some serious contraband. Bryan looked at me, laughed, and said, "You wouldn't believe that this happens all the time." Anyway, Bryan Duncan is a high-energy musician who was just about as crazy as my conservative upbringing would allow. I mean, think about it. He had an album called Anonymous Confessions of a Lunatic Friend, which I loved, by the way. Needless to say, I've been a longtime supporter and fan of Bryan Duncan, so it was a real privilege to connect with Bryan recently over Zoom. Here is that conversation I had with Bryan Duncan.
This is exactly how I look when I wake up in the morning. Gee, biddies.
You got to do my hairstyle. That way you don't have to worry about hair.
Yeah, I don't think that's working for me. They're already calling me grandpa around the house. It's like, man, I wasn't really counting on that.
How many grandkids do you have?
4. For the long time, my kids were in their 30s and they still didn't have grandbabies. And I'm going, I figured I was going to die before I saw the grandbabies. But boy, when they start coming, it's like a fungus. Suddenly they're everywhere. I had to put some rules down around the house. Only 2 grandbabies at a time. For God's sake, I will die sooner.
You got enough energy to entertain them most of the time, though, I'd imagine. I mean, that's one thing I remember about you. You always have energy.
Oh, those were the olden days, man. I'm going to be 68 next month, and it's like, man, I never planned to be this old. I would have planned better.
Well, you've been doing music since early 70s, right?
I've lost count, but I think, Sweet Comfort Band started in 74. And I started writing songs back in 1970, mostly because I couldn't play anybody else's. So, if you make your own stuff up, nobody knows where the mistakes are.
Right. I was always told if you're playing a mistake, you just do it a second time and then it's intentional, right?
Yeah, I call it improvisational jazz if I hit a wrong note. I'm going, no, that's just a complicated jazz chord.
Right. Well, you and I first worked together back in, I think it was 89, 90, something like that, when I promoted my first concert with you. And you came out with the Econo Band.
Oh, if I wouldn't have the Econo Band, I wouldn't have had a career. Because, you just can't, you can't go out there with all of your dreams intact. Sure, yeah, I'd love to have a horn section. That's 5 extra guys at $125 a day. Not counting airfares, next thing you know, the gig is like $6,000 just to break even.
Well, your solo career really started at a good time then, because that's kind of when the advent of all this sequences and equalizer and all that kind of stuff was coming out. So you could travel.
That's why the Econo Band kind of worked. I deliberately went away from guitar sounds because, that didn't sound like something you could manufacture from a computer. And, unless I used a guitar loop or something.
Yeah.
But that made it at least plausible, because, let's face it, you better be bringing something if you're going to stand up there and look like it's a karaoke concert. Right.
Was that a tough transition for you to go from Sweet Comfort to solo and being on stage by yourself, or was that a welcome relief?
There's a little bit of everything. When I left the band, I just wanted to get off the road, and I was tired of not making any money.
Right.
It just never paid for itself. I was 30 years old, about to have a baby, my first kid, and I'm making $200 a week at best. And is like, man, of course, everybody talked about the Sweet Comfort Band days like it was, some kind of glorification. I'm going, all I remember is sleeping on guitar amps in the back of the van. And we look like rock stars because, you just sleep in your clothes and your hair comes out like this. And people go, wow, those guys look, they look ratty. Yeah. And that's how that look was invented, by the way, is being on the road 6 weeks at a time and, living out of hotel rooms and junk food.
Yeah, but how do you feel like that time with Sweet Comfort kind of paved the way for your solo career? Did it cut chops for you, or was it, this is what I'm not going to do?
No, nothing like that. I was just happy to file my tax returns on time, number one. That was it's an awful thing when you're just going, man, we kept putting off taxes because, by the time it came time to pay taxes, we'd already spent all that money. And so, that was the main reason I got out. I didn't even plan to leave and go solo. I went and got a real job because I felt like it was, it was an obligation. I should grow up, be responsible. I started pouring concrete with a friend, and which was mostly the slab foundations. And so I was basically digging ditches. That's all I did. But it was only about 6 months, and somebody asked me to sing at a youth group down the street from me, and they paid me $700. And I'm going, that's more than I made in a month with the Sweet Comfort Band, and I played for 40 minutes, and that was it.
Wow.
So I thought, well, maybe I ought to, think about this. And so I went to a guy and asked him about, management, and I was signed to Light Records.
Yeah.
Probably a year after I left the band. It was a little awkward being up there on the stage by yourself. You better have something to say. And, in I don't know if you remember the Sweet Comfort Band days. I was just a piano player in the corner. I was kind of off to the side of the stage, and I would just sing the songs. I would never say anything to the audience. I mean, almost nothing.
Right.
And if I did, it was something smart. Like get me in trouble, get the whole band in trouble. What did he mean by that? And even when I did it, even when I went solo, we had a formal apology letter because I said whatever I was thinking at the time, which, I really haven't gotten much better at that.
Fly it off the seat of your pants, huh?
Yeah, but I really, with Christian music, I really felt like transparency was the most important thing, which was a huge mistake career-wise because not everybody wants you to be transparent. They always talk about be you, just be you. I'm going, I don't know. I think I'd edit some of that.
Well, you as a performer, you have to have this kind of stage performer of what people expect of you, and then you have that off the stage which is 90% of the life. Was that a struggle for you to have to turn a switch on and turn it off, or were you able to just be yourself all the time?
No, it was a struggle to try to be a little more dignified on stage. That was the struggle.
Yeah.
I felt like, in the early days, some of the ministry that I was getting from others was to be, the transparent and, if you're truthful, that would resonate with people. And it kind of does. And at the same time, it kind of pisses a few people off because, they don't want to really hear that. But I was under the impression that if I was transparent and honest, that I would I would be successful. That was a huge mistake. It was like, oh, well, not everybody has the same transparency, I guess.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I really appreciated most songwriters write songs from their heart and from their experience. And I think talking about your growing up experience, Mr. Bailey had a daughter. That's kind of a story about your growing up, right?
This is my testimony in 3 minutes. As a preacher's kid, I had all the answers before I had any of the questions. And so, the rest of my life has been trying to sort that out, going, is that really true?
Yeah.
The good news is, most of what I was taught by my folks from the scriptures is absolutely true. Most of it. That the things they believed are pretty much the things I believe.
So I'm trying to decide how to go into this because you started a program called Radio Rehab. This is obviously born out of some stuff in your life that you had to deal with. You want to first of all tell what Radio Rehab is and then talk a little bit about how that's working for you on a daily basis?
Radio Rehab is a recovery program. I played a concert for a program called Celebrate Recovery. It was a Christian recovery program when recovery was an awful word. You didn't even bring that up because most people believe that redemption was instantaneous in some ways. And I believe salvation is, but the working out of your salvation is a recovery program in my idea.
Yeah.
But I was singing at this recovery program down in Orange County, and they read the 12 steps of recovery. And the first one just blew me out of the water. It said, we admitted that our dependencies, we were powerless over our dependencies and that they had become unmanageable. And I instantly, I wasn't an alcoholic or anything, but I'm just going, I have several dependencies that make my life unmanageable. And I thought, the more I thought about it, the more I realized everybody needs recovery from something. And in some cases, you need to recover from more than one thing. Yeah. I started a fan club called Lunatics Anonymous.
Right.
Around that time, because I'm going, it's for people with more than one problem. Because I'm just going, all of the principles of recovery can be scripturally applied.
Yeah.
It's, we made an effort to improve our conscious contact with God, our awareness of God. You can read that couple of different ways, but for me, to know God is our primary purpose. I mean, that's what the Bible tells me, is to know him. That's the most important thing. That's why we're here. But to put it in simpler terms, we sought to improve our conscious contact of God as we understood him. They throw that in there, and I'm going, I used to say, we sought to improve our conscious contact with God as we did not understand him.
Yeah.
I'm still learning things about the ways of God, and, recovery was just, those principles are so applicable. Because I used to tell people, if you have living relatives, you have something to recover from.
Yeah. Well, and our whole life really is trying to get rid of stuff out of our lives that get in the way of a relationship with Jesus. And whether that's stuff that we put there ourselves or relationship things that we've been involved with or whatever, but it's that constant yielding to Christ in all aspects of our life.
Absolutely. And, the thing is, addictions are a subtlety in a lot of cases. We automatically think of those people, drugs and alcohol. But I'm going, I grew up in Pentecostal church, and, most of us were rounder than we wanted to be in the full gospel. And say, that overeating was in my household, that was dismissed as a secondary thing. It wasn't like a big deal, but anything that makes your life unmanageable or your health unmanageable is something that you got to work on. And so when I started radio rehab, I'd been going to a recovery program since 1990 because I was suffering from approval addiction. I would do anything as long as it didn't make anybody unhappy. And it was making my life unmanageable. And that's something that happened to me when I went solo. Suddenly you're singing and you're trying to please everyone, and you're trying to say things the way they want to hear them. And, maybe you're not so sure it's true. I developed a real good sense of songwriting because I needed to say stuff that was true for me and kind of give you the opportunity to think about something else in case you didn't like my truth. And so, the whole idea of recovering from addictions, approval addiction was my primary thing. And I still struggle with it. I still compare myself to everybody else. And, you're not valuable if you're not the biggest guy in the room. There's so many things about it that apply to recovery that I made 50 shows. It was based on the 12 steps principle that says, having had a spiritual experience, we sought now to give back to others as a direct result of the changes we've seen.
Yeah.
So, I was just going, here's a chance for me to play songs that I'm going, this song is not Christian or secular or gospel or whatever. This song says something about recovery. One of the first ones I think of was Offspring is just a thrashy rock band, but they were singing this song, I want something else to get me through this. Going, that sounds about right. Even when you know Jesus personally, there's still ways in which I just, there's a lot of downtime where God's kind of not telling me what we're doing. So I'm going to I wind up building a golden calf over in the corner. I'm going, get over yourself. At some point you are a flawed individual. And that's the whole, at the end of the day, that's the whole point of knowing Jesus and understanding what he's doing for you, granting you grace to not be perfect right now.
Like you, I'm a preacher's kid. I grew up with this whole notion of I've got to be on when I'm in public. I've got to, pleasing people. That's a real big thing for me. For me, one of the things that I've had to wrestle with is how do I see myself as God sees myself? The wrestling of what I look like, what I do. Is this good enough for God? When the reality of it is he created me like this. Maybe I took some of this stuff and went south with it, that's for sure. But how do you get in your mind to where you see how you appear in God's eyes?
I'm still working on that. You'd think I'd have it down by now at my age. I watched this TV show called The Chosen, and it was about the woman at the well.
Mm-hmm.
And God tells her intimate details about her life in a non-judgmental way. But in the script, he kind of explains to her what some of her behavior was about that she didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it just flipped her out. And I'm going, that's the way I feel about recovery. When God shows me something about myself in a non-judgmental way and says, this is why you are where you are.
Mm.
And, when I started in recovery, I was thinking that I was just broke. I was a broken person. And then I heard a poem the other day that said, you're not broken. You are merely unfinished. And I thought,
that's cool.
It's an amazing thing when you start to realize that even your definitions of anything are finite.
Uh-huh.
And it's really hard to put your finger on who you are and why you do the things you do.
Yeah.
But I remember, she goes away, the woman at the well goes away and tells the whole village because she just can't believe that this guy knew her better than she knew herself.
Yeah.
And I thought this morning, I was thinking about it in devotions, that if God told me something that made sense to me about who I am that I don't even get, I would drop everything for that truth.
Yeah.
I really would. I would drop everything for the honest truth about why I'm here. And, at the end of the day, that's still what I preach.
Well, I appreciate on your Radio Rehab page, one of the paragraphs you wrote was, the best changes I've ever made in my life were a direct result of the pain I was in. All of the biggest songs I've written were a reaction to pain. My closest relationships have been born through mutual suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that the case? Why do we have to hurt to do stuff?
I don't know, but I've learned in my older age, as we face health issues and our friends are dying, and that I've learned that there's a reason for suffering, that God allows suffering for a purpose. And the fact that it's here, there's no point in asking why it should be. It simply is.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, it removes a great deal of shallowness. And it forces you to find a better way. It is no pain, no gain.
Right.
It's an ironic thing, and it's one of the aspects of God that I don't quite understand, and I used to question a lot more than I do now. But end of the day, I can't regret the pain that I was in, because that brought me to where I am now.
Yeah.
And all of the songs, one of the things that I know about suffering is it creates a compassion for other people who are suffering that you wouldn't have had. And so in that way, there's details about heartache and hardship that are clearly in God's wheelhouse of plans. And I can't wish those painful periods weren't there. They're no fun at the time.
Right. I had a counselor that I was going to for a while. He was a championship weightlifter, and he was like 80 years old and had the world's record for bench press in his age group. But he talked about the fact that if you're not hurting after you lift, you're not building muscle. And so that pain in that case is a resemblance of the fact that you are indeed growing. That was real helpful for me.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you could keep growing after 80, but, okay.
I mean, this guy was ripped, and when you gave him a hug, he practically squeezed you in two, but... Well, let's talk a little bit about music. You have a little bit of experience in that. You've seen a lot of stuff change over the years, from labels to crowdfunding to having to do stuff on your own. What is that transition? What has that journey been like for you? Has that been a good thing, a frustrating thing?
It's been absolutely maddening. There was about, when downloads first came out, and, you had all these social media sites or these applications that would just sell you 1,000 songs for $1.
Yeah.
It was the end of income as we knew it. And I probably went through about 10 years, even after my solo career, where I did not know what to do next. I mean, we don't sell CDs anymore.
Right.
And now, I mean, even now, the platforms that keep popping up for social interaction are so varied, and some of them are there for a little bit and gone, and everybody's everywhere. I mean, there's not a universal platform. Even radio is not what it ever was in the past. And so, and I think everybody's just struggling to have a sense of community, especially in the COVID times we're in now.
Yeah.
I don't know what God has intended. It's almost like the very beginning of time when God allowed the nations to be split and have their own languages, and now they can't talk to each other. I'm going, this sounds kind of like the new social media platforms, kind of like the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
God forbid you have 5 people on the same network.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a word that is really important to my podcast, and that is community. You talk about the community that is missing. You've had some really important people in your life through the course, and I'm thinking of the last little bit with Christopher Redner as an example. He's part of your community. How did you go about making sure that you were surrounded with people to help you through these transitions, whether it be through the recovery stuff or the change in music stuff or the transition to a cement worker or whatever?
Oh, trust me, I didn't, out of my own wisdom, find people. Reddy just approached me. I call him Reddy.
Yeah.
Christopher Redner approached me about what could be done on Kickstarter. And I had no idea. I mean, when I first met some of my early friends, they were saying, there's a thing now called email. And I'm going, really? So how does that work?
Yeah.
I'm behind, a couple of bowling pins all the time. And, it's literally the hand of God pushing somebody in front of an idiot. It's like, here, check this guy out. And I actually started listening to Reddy because, he wasn't very flattering to me, and there's a couple of people like that in my life. It's hard to tolerate someone who is, kind of brutally honest.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like a coach, if you want to get better, you don't pick a guy that's just going to walk around behind you and tell you how wonderful you are.
Right. Right.
Here's what you need to be doing right now. So, I mean, again, that's the pain of growing.
So these people you didn't necessarily go out to seek, but they kind of sought you out. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Well, Christopher did. I mean, he did the Slow Revival tour with my manager.
Mm-hmm.
And he also worked for World Vision.
Okay.
And he was a crowdfunding guy, and he did a lot of that kind of work. So, I mean, his insights were certainly welcome from the beginning. Slow Revival was a successful tour.
Yeah.
Which is really a rare thing. It's like, hey, we got home and there was some money left over. That's it's a miracle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Reddy was a godsend, but it's like, my wife didn't come. I didn't pick her out either. She showed up and asked me out, and and I let her talk to me too. She doesn't flatter me too often, and it's like, cause I don't want to hear bad things about my defects of character or what I'm not getting done, but and even if they do tell me something, I got to go away and pout for a minute and then think about it. And then,
yeah,
but eventually, I listen to the hard truths and, hopefully make some kind of adjustments. I'm still here.
Yeah. And that's a good thing because we need more music from Bryan. So I know through the stuff that I've been getting from Christopher that you've got some stuff kind of in the hopper, so to speak, of music that you're writing. So this change in industry style hasn't stopped your creativity.
Well, it has in some cases. I got to tell you, COVID just caught me completely off guard, and the lockdown, and I didn't work. I mean, I haven't done a full concert in over a year.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do with it. And I got to tell you, as a writer, the last thing I want to do is write.
Oh.
It's no fun. And, you have to focus on details, and especially with sad songs or heartbreakers,
Mm-hmm.
you have to sit in that stew of emotional bankruptcy and take notes on how it feels. And that's how the song becomes something that someone else can be encouraged by. I'm writing these Christmas songs, and they're all tearjerkers right now. I just started writing sentimental Christmas songs. They're basically stories of Christmases in my life that really spoke to me, because, after 100 Christmases that I've been through, it kind of gets, pretty rote. But I've got a song called The Print of a Baby's Hand, and it just says, the baby, I understand now, because I'm looking at these little Christmas decorations that my kids made, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And they're still on my tree. But I'm going, that says, and I understand when I look at these, it says that baby Jesus didn't stay too long, from the time his mama brought him home. In a blink, those tiny hands were gone, but they still hold my world. And as a way to say, baby Jesus is not a baby anymore.
Right.
But you don't want to just throw that at people like a stone. You want to show them a tender side of it. And it's like, I just finished a song about a story about my son who just, he was embarrassed because he didn't have anything to give me. And he, at the end of the Christmas party, he just kind of threw a unopened, handwritten Christmas card on the floor. Didn't even say it was from him, nothing. He threw it there and left quietly, because he was embarrassed. He was embarrassed that he didn't have any money and he couldn't buy me anything. And he just says, man, you just mean everything to me, and you've done so much for me, and I really love you and I appreciate you. I don't have anything to give you. So the song's called A Christmas Card. That thing is a tearjerker to me. I don't know if everybody else will find it that way, but it's the second verse of the song goes, now he thought he got me nothing, but that is where he's wrong. That little bit of nothing always turns into a song every Christmas time when I remember when it was just him. I think about that all the time now. It's like, and those are tearful, heartfelt memories of Christmas that I think we could use at a time when, it kind of get distracted by other good things, but at the same time, you lose what has the most value. So anyway, that's what we're doing, because we've discovered that at Christmas time, I'm getting more airplay than I get any other time. And across the boards, it's not just Christian music. I'm getting Christmas airplay on secular side, jazz stations, and adult contemporary, because suddenly there's no, they don't put you in a little category.
Right.
Well, you're a Christian artist. Well, you're a gospel artist. Well, you're this. It's just Christmas. And so that's kind of the direction we've been going. And again, that's a direct result of the inside of Christopher Redner.
Well, I will tell you this. My favorite Christmas album of all time is Christmas is Jesus. And it's the first Christmas album I pull out every single Christmas, the first one I play. And it's probably the last one I play at the end of the Christmas season. And I know we're doing this podcast is airing in July, so Christmas in July, I guess that works. But if you haven't had a chance to hear Bryan's Christmas is Jesus Christmas album, you guys have to hear it. It's just an amazing album. But I'm happy to hear there's more Christmas stuff.
Most Christmas songs are written in the summertime.
That's true.
The original song, "Oh, the weather outside is frightful," was written on a day when it was one of the hottest days in California that summer. And that's the first line they came up with. So I'm going, that's kind of when Christmas songs are written. And, it's hard to imagine. It took me a long time to even write again in that direction, because man, what hasn't been said 1,000 times in Christmas songs? I'm going, what do you say that's different? Oh, though I came up with a second line in a song. It's called All the Way to Christmas. And the second verse goes, there's not a wise man to come as far as me. There's not a shepherd or an angel that could set me free. took a manger to get a stranger to see. The road to heaven doesn't have another guarantee. And then it goes, here's one gift you could never take back. You could never take back. Love goes all the way to Christmas.
Ah, I love it. I love it.
So, I mean, it's only taken me a year and a half to even find inspiration for doing Christmas stuff, because I don't want it to be the same old thing. And, you know, shepherds and angels, pretty soon you just start to glaze over.
Yeah.
Even you know, jingle bells, you know, bells and whistles and lights, and, you know, there's got to be something else. And I noticed on the last record, you know, you were talking about Christmas is Jesus. One of the songs that didn't get a lot of airplay was the one song I think that I wrote. Well, there's a couple songs on there I wrote, but one was called Christmas is Jesus. You know, I was a little miffed actually when I just said, you know, I wanted to just smack people in the face, kind of, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm going, you know, here's the point. I don't like that song that much these days, but there's a line in there, a star from the heavens has fallen for you. And I thought that was maybe the only good line in that song, but that song, you know, here it is 20, 30 years later. And that song got more airplay this year than it did when the record first came out.
Wow.
And I think it's because, you know, people are looking for some real salvation at Christmas time.
Yeah.
That maybe they forgot about, or they just missed it somehow. It's not that all the other stuff is bad. It's just, sometimes it's just a distraction or a deflection though.
Well, I've always been struck by the fact that for about a month and a half, the whole world listens to songs about Jesus. And, you know, you don't get that every other season. Easter comes around. Yeah, it's the Easter bunny. Here comes Peter Cottontail, whatever. But at Christmas, everybody sings about Jesus. And I just think that's awesome.
You know, I did play one socially distanced Christmas concert this last December at a biker church.
Oh,
and I came in, and before the event, they were playing a video clip of Twisted Sister singing the first Noel, or, you know, but I mean, here's a Twisted Sister, you know, these rock, you know, bizarre guys, and they're talking about the Son of God at Christmas, and I'm going, wow, no, I don't think they even realize what they're talking about. But it was funny. I'm going, you're absolutely right. It's a chance to reach out to a community when they're actually more receptive to the possibility of the gospel. So anyway, I mean, the whole point, I told my manager, you know, because I've always gotten on camera and said, hey, I'm going to do a Christmas record. You know, you should help me raise money for this, because everything I do now is crowd funded.
Right.
But I thought the best way I could convince you that this is a worthwhile endeavor is to play you one of the songs, like this song I just finished, the Christmas card. If I played you that, you would instantly want to be a part of it, because it's a way of speaking to people from their heart, you know, on a heart level that's not, you know, you ought to get right. It's like, here's the memories that matter. I have a couple of songs like that, you know, would be a better representation of why you would want to support another Christmas record when there are so many to pick from. I want this record to be different. And I think at my age, I'm really getting, you know, soft in my old age. You know, I cry over stupid things. You know, I get all mushy around my grandkids. I've got a little 1-year-old throws her arms around my knee and puts her head on my knee, and is like, it's a feeling like I've never had before. And I'm going, am I getting soft? Is this what grandpas do? They turn into mashed potatoes. So I'm singing songs of my own, of the things that have moved me in the last 10 years of, you know, spending Christmas with now my wife and my kids and my grandkids. You know, last year, my mom died and my dad had already passed away. And it occurred to me, I'm going to do a song too called An Empty Chair at Christmas, or Since You Went Home for Christmas. Is like, you always hear these people go, please come home for Christmas.
Yeah.
But I'm going, this is another concept that you don't get till you're in your 60s, is like, since you went home for Christmas, it's like I started to realize I'm the oldest guy in my family now.
Yeah.
You know, my uncles and aunts are all gone, and my mom and dad are gone, and going, wow, they left me in charge, which is really a dangerous thought.
That's funny. Well, Bryan, you spent a lot of time playing with a lot of different people over the years. I was wondering if you could somehow put together a dream band that would have anybody from either current or yesteryear. Who would you put together on that roster? Who would you have on that stage with you performing the all-star Bryan Duncan band?
There's an awful lot of people, you know, the Heavenly Angel band is what you're talking about.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I've had some of the best musicians and singers in on my records over the long haul. One of my favorite records is The Anonymous Confessions of a Lunatic Friend.
Love that album.
And I had Steve Porcaro of one of my favorite groups, Toto. He was the drummer for Toto, and he came in and played on it. Dan Huff played on guitar. He played with Giant. I mean, I've had a myriad of great bass players, but Nathan East was,
yeah.
You know, when he came in, he played with Eric Clapton and a host of other guys. But, you know, I was all giddy when he was in the studio. And then Peter Wolf was a producer for Chicago, played Hammond B3. But, you know, even the Neo Soul Band guys, you know, Phil Curry on Hammond B3 is just stupid. You know, the guys that were in that band. So, you know, but I haven't played with too many people that were bad. Really.
Yeah. Well, you've played with so many good ones. I thought it'd be fun to hear kind of, you know, what some of that sweet spot for you. So one of the things I've noticed with a lot of artists is as we get older, and I'm not an artist, but we tend to mellow out a little bit. Can we expect another hardcore R&B kind of a sound from you? Big horn section. I know horns aren't real big things these days, but you know.
Well, you know, I'd love to do that, but again, if you're crowdfunding, you know, it's hard to know what your budget is going to be.
Yeah.
I was talking to one of my old producers when we did Mercy and the Slow Revival record together, and I mean, it was full horn sections and, you know, throw down. And, you know, if you give me a track like that, I'm going to start screaming, you know, that's what I mean, that's James Brown to me.
Yeah.
But, you know, you know, I walk behind Jesus and I'm going, you know, he would have to provide a budget for that kind of record. But I was talking to producer Dan Postema from my olden days. He just turned 70.
Oh, wow.
I said, you know, I feel like I can't do anything anymore because I don't have the money to do it. You know, I can't hire the big time people. And he reminded me, he says, Bryan, says, what's the biggest song you ever recorded? Well, it was I Love You With My Life from the Sweet Comfort Band days. It was a #1 single in 3 different decades.
Wow.
And he said, there was nothing to that song, no offense, but I mean, it didn't need a big band. It didn't need a horn section because it was about what the song said. And that's kind of what I'm focused on at this point. A good song is something you could sing whether you have a band or not.
Mm-hmm. So as you're looking back over your career and you've done so many cool things, do you have one kind of pinch me moment that stands out that, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got to do that?
Oh, man. You know, the funny thing is I think of disasters more than I think about the good times because there was so many to pick from.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying is, you know, that gig where everything blew up, you know, when you broke down on the freeway and spent 8 hours on the side of the road at 3:00 in the morning, skateboarding on the freeway because there was no traffic. Man, I can't. Probably one of the best things was, you know, when I had all of those, you know, all of my favorite guys in the studio playing, that the Lunatics Anonymous record was pretty amazing. And working with Michael Omartian. Oh yeah. On the Mercy project. I had to pinch myself then.
Yeah.
Cause I mean, that guy could write a song. We started a song called Step by Step. And I just went out of the room to get coffee for the two of us so we could write this song. And he had the whole track done in like 10 minutes. It was like, I come back and my coffee isn't even, cold. And he's already got a track. That had to have been a pinch me moment.
What I'm hearing you say is your pinch me moments are all wrapped around relationships with people.
Absolutely. Even these songs that I'm telling you about at Christmas, the pinch me moment at Christmas was my son giving me nothing. He had nothing to give me but a Christmas card, but it meant everything to me. I have it framed in my office to this day. That was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've got a song I'm working on about my daughter who lost a diamond ring in all of the hubbub of Christmas opening presents. And we almost lost that ring in the wrapping. And I thought, we found it because I had taped the whole Christmas service or the whole Christmas opening. And I thought, here's an example of why we revisit the traditions of Christmas so that we remember what has the most value and we can find it again.
Yeah.
But that was about a relationship with my daughter, and one was about my son. And the missing chair thing will be probably about my mom or my folks being gone. Or, yeah, I mean, the thing is, God speaks to me most often through his children. It's kind of surprising. I mean, because, they are irritating too. And they sometimes they speak for the devil. But I'm going, everything that's ever stopped me in my tracks that I've written songs about has been, a mother telling me about losing her son, or a guy called me yesterday. His wife died of cancer yesterday. And, these are moments that really didn't involve me. But they are part of my life, mm-hmm. because these people had the trust in me to call and tell me about their story.
Yeah.
And that makes me feel more important than anything else. When my kids come and tell me what's going on in their lives, I almost can't hear them because I'm so honored that they have the nerve to tell me what's not going right.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, wow, I'm so self-conscious and self-aware that I might have missed part of the story.
Every Saturday, we send out a prayer newsletter to a bunch of folks who have committed to praying for artists. What can we be doing prayer-wise? How can we lift you before the Father in the weeks and months ahead?
The number one thing is, we're all looking for ways forward in the future. The world is definitely changing in ways that I don't know how to adjust to.
Mm-hmm.
Our biggest prayer right now should be for a vision of what God has in mind in the next 12 months, and how can we be a part of it? That's a lot of I've been slow to respond, even with writing songs, because I don't know kind of what needs to be said the most. But I think, there's a reason why Christmas is Jesus is a song about Jesus, mm-hmm. and Christmas.
Yeah.
And that came back stronger than ever, because I think people are, want to understand the grace of God and his plan for salvation. And I don't, we can't deliver that the same way we always did. It sounds like, you just go out there and quote scriptures, but there has to be some wisdom behind the way you quote scriptures. I always post on my social media a little thing on Twitter called It's in the Bible. Mm-hmm. It was like, rather than, because it sounds more interesting than to say the Bible says, because that has a condescending tone to it. But if you say something and then say, by the way, that's in the Bible, can you believe it?
Yeah.
It invites people to approach the truth and the love of God and the grace of God. And man, I want to be a part of that somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I would pray for.
Bryan Duncan has been such a key person in my Christian music life. From my first purchase of a record that was Have Yourself Committed, to being able to promote multiple concerts with him. And, Yes, I've been part of almost every crowdfunding campaign that he has run. I hope you don't mind me putting on my Bryan Duncan fan hat as we chatted today. But I'm also grateful for Bryan's focus on how God is helping rebuild our lives into God's image. We all have areas in our lives that we place more importance on than serving God, and I'm sure most of us have things that get in the way of doing what's right and healthy for our minds and bodies. But that doesn't stop God from loving us and wanting a personal relationship with Him. He is always wanting us to set aside those unhealthy actions or substances or behaviors so that we can have intimacy with Him. And I love this too. God always provides a way for us to avoid those addictions and temptations. In 1 Corinthians 10:13, it says, "The temptations in your life are no different from what others experience." And God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than what you can stand. And whenever you are tempted, He will show you a way out so that you can endure. Would you join me in working to recognize those lifelines God throws us so that we can draw closer to Jesus each day? Well, before we wrap up the podcast today, Bryan did send a Christmas song for us to enjoy. Like he mentioned, he is working on a number of songs for an upcoming Christmas album, and if you want to help finance that album, I'll be sure to include the links in the show notes down here, so be sure and check those out. So let's start up Christmas in July with the latest Christmas song from Bryan Duncan.
Bells will be ringing, the sad, sad news. Oh, what a Christmas to have the blues. My baby's gone, I have no friend to wish me greetings once again. Choirs will be singing silent night, Christmas carols by candlelight. Please come home for Christmas. Please come home for Christmas. If not for Christmas, by New Year's night. Friends and relations send salutations. Sure as the stars shine above. But this is Christmas. Yes, Christmas, my day. Time of year to be with the ones you love. So won't you tell me you'll never more roam? Christmas and New Year's will find you home. There'll be no more sorrow, no grief or pain. Then we'll be happy, happy once again. There'll be no more sorrow, no grief or pain. And we'll be happy, happy once again.
As always, thanks for joining me for this conversation today. I am grateful that we get to spend this time together each week hearing stories of God's amazing faithfulness. As a regular listener to this podcast, would you mind taking a few minutes and rating it on your favorite podcast app? Reviews and ratings really help spread the word so that other folks can hear about these great conversations. And if you have comments or questions for me, please feel free to drop me a message on any of the social media platforms. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon by searching for @CCMExchange. Or you can always drop me an email on the website christianmusicarchive.com. I'm really looking forward to our time together next week when I have another great conversation with one of the musicians you'll find on the pages of the Christian Music Archive. So until then, remember this: God loves you. In fact, He's crazy about you.